All right, so this is actually this video from this podcast where Jimmy Dore revealed the true, real, actual reason why he had left the Young Turks was from like a month ago or so, or maybe a couple months ago, somewhere around there. But he went on a podcast. I have no idea what Steve Hofstetter podcast. I think I've never heard of it before, but he went on this podcast and he speaks about and reveals the true and real reason as to why he left the Young Turks. So if you don't know, I believe it was something like 3 or 4, something like that, months ago that Jimmy Dore departed officially from the Young Turks. Now, Jimmy Dore, he worked for the Young Turks for like a year, a couple years. That's how I first got to know him. You guys probably knew him from there too in the beginning. The Jimmy Dore Show in its current form really has only existed since 2016. Prior to that, it was mostly just comedic videos on there. The channel is actually owned by TYT as well, just like the Rubin Report was, But he decided to branch out and launch his own show in 2016. That's what he eventually decided to do. But, I got to know Jimmy Dore from the Young Turks main shows he would get on. That's when I first became a fan of Jimmy Dore, was back in 2014 when he would appear on the main show. And so, he has his departure from TYT. It's a slight bit sudden. There was a good amount of people who were surprised by it, obviously. And, the answers he gave basically was that, he wanted to be independent, that TYT was getting too corporate for him. And basically, like, he just really didn't need it anymore, and he just didn't like doing it anymore. He also mentioned that, he was only an employee officially, like, the employee status for, like, a year. This is because he needed the health care for that year. And he says that, the following years he was just a, independent contractor, which means that, you're not like an official employee, you're just a contractor. Kind of like, a YouTuber is with YouTube. A YouTuber is not an employee at YouTube, they're an independent contractor. Same thing with the Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, etc., DoorDash, whatever. But he never gave us any insight as to why he went from being an employee to, well, the supposed thing was, I just needed healthcare for that 1 year. But it looks like that wasn't really the full story, and let's hear what he has to say.
Started working with the Young Turks, and Cenk Uygur showed me that it's okay to let your anger show, that people will connect with it, and it's okay to say whatever the F you want, right? So I was even more radical than they were. So they got really popular, and so they became a huge corporation. They got a $20 million investment and everything, and they had to get a human resources department and all kinds of, like, there's that.
Yeah.
And so I had a Twitter skirmish with someone, and I got reprimanded over it.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? You monitoring my Twitter? And they're like, yeah, well, this and that, and it's blah, blah, blah. And then, so you're going to get this letter from Human Resources, and you have to sign it, and blah, blah, blah. And I go, hey, guess what? I'm quitting, because I'm not doing this.
Wow.
And they're like, okay. I put them in a position, so they're a big corporation. So my actions on Twitter, because I was their employee, actually reflected negatively on them, right? And I didn't want that to happen. I didn't want to put them in and so they were like maybe in a they weren't, but they could have maybe been in a quasi-legal situation, and they didn't want to be, and I'm like, and so I get it, and I actually probably go, hey, I didn't realize that me being your employee and me doing outside you would have to then manage it.
Yeah.
So that this doesn't happen. I wasn't mad at them, but so that I don't put you in this position again, because I'm going to do this again.
Yeah.
So that I don't put you in this position again. Let's just not have me being employee anymore, and I can still come in as a like an outside person, as a guest or whatever. And so that's what we did. And so then I was like a contractor with them for like another 6 months. And now I'm just completely on my own, because even as a contractor, there's still a lot of corporate things that go along with they're a huge corporation. They have like 100 employees, maybe more.
Yeah.
So there's just so many things that go along with working inside a corporation.
All right. So that's interesting. A story that he gives is interesting. And so not only did I not cover this when this had came out, I additionally don't believe I did a video on the other sort of situation that he's referencing there. I didn't talk about that either, so we'll take the chance to talk about it there. One thing I want to say is 100 employees does not make you a huge corporation. Depending on the sector you're in, the definition of small business is a bit weirdly defined, but if they don't qualify as a small business, they're at best like a in-between a sort of the lowest portion of medium and the highest portion of small business. But 100 employees is not a huge corporation. A huge corporation is like, you've got like upwards of 1,000 or at least 500. At least 500. But really, if you're a huge corporation, you're definitely upwards of 1,000. So TYT is not a huge corporation. But them having the whole, HR department is something interesting. But here's what went down. So there's a person named Francesca Fiorentini who I believe at the time was working for the Young Turks. So it was a bit of an interesting incident. But basically, she got into a back and forth with Jimmy Dore on Twitter because, I don't know, she disagreed with him on Syria, okay, about policy over there and what, the U.S. should do. And this really kind of, just went up, you know what I'm saying? And it got into a really big conversation. And Jimmy Dore slid into her DMs and really started saying some pretty, just sort of vulgar, confrontational, aggressive stuff. You can just sort of, I'll try to read some of these tweets without using the, sort of expletives, obviously. But, she says, let me know if you want to grab a coffee with a coward, i.e. me. And then he says, F your coffee, coward. Come on my show, you liar. You don't even have an excuse why you won't come on. You are way lamer than I ever thought. But now a lot of people are going to know just how lame you are. So, this kind of stuff is really just kind of odd, to be honest with you. And it is very aggressive and just sort of, I don't know, D-baggy. I mean, I don't know how else to put that. If someone came into your DMs, first of all, if someone's in your DMs and is, actively insulting you, calling you a little fraud, by the way, he's literally accusing her of being some sort of, paid shill, literally. She's being paid to purport whatever she's saying, which is insane. But, someone's in there insulting you, nonstop. What, are you really going to go on the show? Someone jumped in your DMs and is literally, trashing you nonstop in an attempt to get you on the show. Why would you do that? It doesn't even make sense. How is that a way to incentivize someone to go on your show? It doesn't make sense. And then, it goes on from here. There's more of these. But, he just goes off. The most embarrassing thing about how you got ratioed is that isn't thread with my followers, blah, 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 blah. Another one, saying, you're really funny spelling. Add propaganda and an even worse liar about it. And by the way, guys, this, and look, it goes on here, you're a paid liar. What does that mean? You do it willingly? And if you think this is ending here, you are sadly mistaken, because I'm making sure everyone knows who you are. Not only at TYT, but everyone everywhere I go is going to know about what a piece of blank you are. What? What is this nonsense, dude? This is some weird, sort of, you're under the extreme influences of some sort of substance to be, making me, you're a paid shill, and I'm going to out you to everybody. TYT, your mom, your dad, your dog, your pet turtle. I'm going to out you to everyone, and everybody's going to know that you're a paid shill, including it. It's what? What is happening? What are you talking about? It's just super weird, and it's just not, normalcy. This is some sort of, a AJ type of stuff. It's very sort of odd, to be honest with you. Just kind of going crazy. And by the way, another piece of info you should probably know, this is at the same time that Jimmy's on vacation in Italy. It's he's on vacation and he's literally going into DMs of a coworker and just letting her have it, being really aggressive, being really D-baggy. Especially weird in an attempt to get her on the show. It doesn't seem to be a way to incentivize someone to come on a show by jumping into their DMs. And that's a whole nother level. Once you jump into someone's DMs, you're doing that. It's a whole nother level of that kind of a thing. It gets even weirder though. So if you look at the timestamp of these messages now, I don't think he's sending it at 4:05 a.m. because he was in Italy, so he's in a different time zone. But regardless, as you can see, he sends the last message at 4:05. She doesn't respond, and then he sends another message at 2:20 p.m. So again, the times probably aren't the same because obviously he's in a different time zone, but the time gap is obviously still the same, right? So a 10-hour time gap. And he just says, having a good day, ha ha. What? Ha ha? Bruh. Either he's sounding, to me, that sounds like a sort of a super villain from a movie or a cartoon or something. Or he's sounding like somebody who's Sherlock Holmes, a really excited Sherlock Holmes who found out something that's really exciting. And he says, let me know when you stop being a coward and come on my show. I'm super enjoying this. Really weird stuff. I don't know. I'm not really sure what Jimmy, gets his, situation off to. You know what I'm saying? But interesting stuff. Thanks for revealing that you're a piece of blank. I live for these moments when I sniff someone out like you. Guy sounds like a police dog. Like, what is this, dude? What is this? So this is the exchange that's going on in terms of like, where someone's explaining, the whole, this is what resulted in this, right? And I think that is probably it, I believe. So basically, this is what Jimmy Dore was doing in those DMs to someone who also worked at TYT. So for me, I was kind of thinking about it, and I'm a little bit torn. But the thing that I think is probably the sort of, I don't know, the sort of issue that comes down to divide this whole thing for me is like, it's between two people working at TYT, and so as the people working at the company, as a company, you have to manage those sort of disputes, obviously, because it's intra-company sort of things, and you have to keep certain guidelines going. And so if it were like, let's say between, I don't know, Jimmy Dore and Neera Tanden, which, the stuff that he's saying here even is also, I don't know, man, the stuff that he's saying here is just so insane, okay? It's insane. Like, you can't do that, even to other people, even if it's not someone you're working with, like who works at TYT. That kind of stuff is like, I don't know what to tell you. But the point being that, if it's between two people at TYT, obviously TYT is going to have to do something to resolve the dispute because they've got guidelines. They've got to keep, obviously, certain like rules in place. They've got to keep a sort of cohesion going on. You can't have people going to like, just crazy lengths going after each other and whatnot. And to be quite frank with you, Jimmy Dore's behavior here is just like bad. Like, it's just despicable and it's not okay. Like, you can't jump into someone's DMs and just like go off on them being just a total D-bag. Like, come on, dude, what are you doing? And this dude's on a vacation, bro. Like, be on your vacation. Why are you doing this right now, dude? Like, it doesn't make sense. So, and whether or not it was a good decision for him to leave, I think that's a whole topic for another video. But, was it, I think, a good sort of mutual benefit for the two to sort of split ways? I think so, especially with Jimmy's sort of logic there where he says, oh, well, I'll leave because I don't want you to be, sort of on the other end of this. And I like how he says, like, I'm going to do this again. Like, what, you're going to be a total D-bag and an a-hole to other people who work at the company or other people, and it's just insane to me. But this kind of a thing just doesn't really happen to many people, honestly, because you kind of have to go to some pretty big boundaries to kind of reach that level. But, so that is the real reason why Jimmy Dore actually left. Now, is that the only reason? No. I'm sure that there were other factors that kind of kicked in. I think the whole corporate thing, where he's under this delusion that the Young Turks is some sort of like a massive corporation, probably played into it in his sort of dislike for corporate culture or whatever he thinks. I think that played a big into it. Also, some of the disagreements that he's had with Jenk and the crew at TYT, I'm sure that played into it. But I think that this is sort of the deciding straw that broke. Not only is it the straw that broke the camel's back, I think it was a big factor for him. Now, was it a good decision? I think so. I think it ended up being a sort of beneficial situation for both parties, with Jimmy Dore leaving, not having more of these conflicts. But anyways, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this down below. Definitely let me know what you think. Do you think he was right to leave? Do you think TYT was right to do what they did in terms of their HR department? I'm really, really curious to know your thoughts on this, and I will be reading the comments as I always do.